Yup, we are here now for the update data. Yes. After adding data, sometimes we want to update it. We want to make some changes. We feel like we made a mistake or so. So that's what we want to handle here. What we'll be needing to import here, we'll be needing file system. We won't be needing the UUID anymore because the ID do not change. Yeah, other details may change. Then we'll be needing the query DB file. So just those. And finally, we'll also be needing the DB file check. This is totally necessary because we need to check if the database is already there. If it is not there, we'll just terminate the process instead of wasting resources, stuff like that. So I'll just paste all that in so that okay, let me just paste that in. Okay, so as we continue, we'll see where all this is leading us to. So we begin as usual: export defaults, async, function. I believe all this now looks familiar. Updates, data. All right, it takes in info. Don't forget that. It takes in info as argument, and then we want to call the DB file check at the beginning here. We are calling at the beginning so that nothing even happens since there is no file. There is nothing to check, so why stress yourself? No reason. Next thing, we create our try and catch block, and as usual, we just paste in some code. All right, that's working. Then what we need to do is to know which data we want to edit. So how do we get to know? That is where the unique ID comes in, and that is why the unique ID do not change. So let's ask the user to give us a unique ID. We'll use the inquirer again. So we do const answers, just answer should be fine. Answer equal to await inquirer dot prompt right, just one field. That's what we require now. It will be of type inputs like that. Name is ID. Yeah, name is ID. And then message, oh, let's fix this. Okay, message please enter data. Let's use record ID. That's it. Just format that a little bit. Now when we get this data, what we want to do is to loop through whatsoever we have in our database and see if we have that data. Now if we have that data, we'll keep it safe or hold it in a variable so that we can use it in a bit. So first thing is, where do we intend to save it? I mean, save the data that we'll get. So we'll just set let's call this variable user, and then we'll now loop through. we use the info, this point. We'll use the for each loop. The for each loop is also used by an array and some other kind of data types too. Remember that we got this info from the query db function. So for each, you open brackets, and then inside of it you pick each data at a time. So each of the data, we could call each data elements, and then it takes in a callback function too. So it's taking in two arguments. That is one is each of the data, or an element representing each data, and then there's a callback function where every other thing happens. So what do we want to check here? We want to check if there is any match. So if if elements dot id is equivalent to answer dot id, then user becomes the element. What we are saying here is, if we meet any of the existing data that matches this ID that was just passed in, then we will now save the data as user. Make sense? Beautiful. Now when this is done, we will now come down below this, and then we'll try to update whatever that is already there in the user. So for this, we'll create a new function that would be will build out under this current function, and we could call that update details. Do not forget, it needs two arguments, and that is the user, then the info, two of them. So we'll now go down and build out this function. This function will look very similar to our add data function, so you don't have to sweat it out. So what we'll be doing now is a lot of repetition of what we've done before, but they are very necessary as we are building out the rest part of our code. So we'll just call on this function. We'll call it update details. Recall, it takes in the user and the info as arguments. So what's the first thing we want to do? The first thing we want to do is now to request for inputs from the user, and see where they want these inputs to be, what they want to overwrite or what they want to update. Now something that we'll do is to provide them with their initial value. When we provide an initial value and they see the value and they feel like this value is valid, they could just hit enter instead of rewriting or retyping that value. Now this is important when you have to write something that's more complicated than maybe just a name or phone number, stuff like that. So let's begin with our try and catch block. All right, as usual, let's paste this in here. All right, now first things we want to get is what? The inputs. All right, so let's get those inputs. The inputs we could use let's use let's use feedback. Let's just diversify feedback. Okay, equal to this has to be async. All right, so that this is our wait inquirer dot prompt. Okay, open this, and then this is, it's an array of objects. Now what I am collecting here is the same thing I collected in the add data file. So I could actually just paste this like this, just copy this and paste it right in here. But we want to do something extra. We do not want to just collect this detail like we said. We want to also show them the defaults. We want to show them their initial inputs as default. So what we'll now do is we introduce one key for each of these inputs, and that is the default. So let's put it here, and we'll put default. Now where are we going to get this from? We are getting it from the user that we just made or that we just saved. And so here we could put user dot name, comma. I hope this is making sense. We came up here and we found the user that our user wants to update. Now we came down here and we are now passing in those details here, so that if the user do not want to update it, he can just hit enter and pass it by. So user dot phone. Down here we also have defaults, and it could be user dot age. And that's all. We'll format this and we'll have it nice and clean. So if you look properly, we now have the defaults added to each of them. Now when we try to update, we will now see the initial option or the initial value that was there. This will all make sense when we are testing it, in case it's not making sense right now. All right, now when we finish collecting details about this person, what do? We now want to update whatsoever or whosoever that we are working on. So to update it, we do user dot name. Now we are now updating it with the feedback. We now say user dot name is now equals to feedback dot name, user dot phone is now equal to feedback dot phone, user dot age is now equal to feedback dot age. All right, good. So we now have an updated user. All we now have to do is to add this user to the info, and everything is done. We will now overwrite the database and everything is complete. Just watch it out. That's what we are about to do next. So what we're about to do next is to update the database. And how are we updating it? Exactly what we've done before. And what did we do before? We just did await fs.write file Remember the difference between write file and append file. Which file are we writing to? db.json. After this, what are we writing to it? We are writing to it a stringified version of the info. After this is callback function. It takes in error as argument, and here if there's error it tells you that there was an error. Error updating database. If there's no error, log to the console and say user, this has to be a string too, user updated successfully. Wow, and that is it. Our code is complete. Our code is complete. So let's check, is this working perfectly? Can we trust it? All right. We'll now do node updates.js, hit enter. Whoa, I think I made a mistake. It should be update data.js. And by the way, we have not done one thing. We need to do one more thing here, which is actually call the function. So we need to use querydb, and in the querydb we'll call the update data function. Hopefully everything should work fine this time around. So hit enter. Woo! It's working fine. We have 3 data here, right? Notice that this 2 doesn't have the adult key. So let's try and see if we can update that. So enter the record ID, hit enter. Now the name, here we could change from Sam to Samson. The phone. Now there is an issue here that I need to check. It's not showing the default value. So where exactly did I get that one wrong? Defaults. Okay. Okay. Let's see this. Okay. Just to be sure, I think this was made to be capital letter. I think so. All right, let's save that. I think it's supposed to be capital letters. I think it's case sensitive. Okay, let's go again and paste that record, hit enter, boom, it shows. So this is case sensitive, and I think I missed it initially. You need to check it out so that it doesn't mess up. So we have Sam there, so we could change it to Samson. Hit enter, we have some numbers there. You could change it to a longer number. Hit enter, something could be a minor. So this is successful. Now, just to be sure that everything worked fine, let's retrieve data. Data.js, hits, and where is Samson? Awesome. Now we're having two keys. I think we made some mistake somewhere around where we had the keys. All right, so this, I think, is supposed to be capital letter. We need to it need to be, these things are case sensitive, so that's why I have two phone numbers here too. So this has to maintain the capital letters, phone, age. Yeah, I mixed all that up, so sorry about all that. So let's try again to update data. So update, we'll pick this one that's not messed up yet. I think everything should be fine this time around. Put it this way, hit enter. We have a bearer. We could change it to a bearer plenty. Hit it. Let's have a longer number now. Hits, and okay, let's leave it at yes. Let's clear this, and then let's try retrieving our data again. Hit it, and good. We are no longer having multiple data like we had here, and that is beautiful. Awesome. So please be sure to check for case sensitivity. I messed all of them up here when I didn't pay attention to that detail, but let me walk you through what I have done here. We began by importing modules as usual, then creating a function. But this time around, we are introducing the DB file check, which is supposed to help us to check if the database file exists. Now, if it doesn't exist, everything is terminated, and the user has to, check and maybe create data or check if there's something wrong. Now, after that, in the try block, we requested for the ID of the user. After requesting for the ID of the user, we moved next to search for that user, found the user, and then called the update details function. We passed in the user that we got and the info down to this function. Coming into this function, we got back all the details that the user already had and put it in the default like this. And so when we are asking the user for a particular detail this time around, we are showing them the default too. And so if they hit enter, that default will continue to be there. Then we updated each key accordingly and then overwrote the file. And that is it. We have an updating application. What is more, we have one more thing, and that is to delete data. Delete data, there we'll be looking at how to remove any or all of this data that we have done. I will see you in that one too.